When a very massive star dies, it will suddenly collapse upon itself, and because it collapses upon itself so quickly, the core of the collapse becomes so dense that all of the material that is trying to collapse upon itself will actually rebound off the core in an insane explosion called a supernova. And that is how massive stars die. Although the supernova that we are going to take a picture of in this video is a different type of supernova called type 1a that happens where a dead sun-like star, which is basically a white dwarf, basically feeds off material from another star in a binary star system or collides with the star, reaches some critical mass and basically explodes into a supernova. Really crazy stuff. Those are actually much rarer, once every 500 years or so in our own Milky Way galaxy. And what's cool is that those type of supernovae, you can actually estimate the distance they are from us based on their brightness. What a lot of people don't realize is that that moment of supernova, when it explodes like that in a super bright explosion, it is something that we can capture very easily from backyards or here rooftop balconies with just amateur equipment like I have on my left. And those supernovae, they happen all the time. And right now, there's actually a galaxy called by the very sexy name of NGC 7331 that has within this galaxy, which is around 40 million light years away, there's a supernova that is going on right now. And what is absolutely insane is that 40 million light years away, this supernova exploding, it means that star exploded 40 million years ago, and only now do we get the light from the explosion. And because this explosion is so bright, even though it is so distant, we can actually see it with amateur equipment. And something that is absolutely insane to me is that this explosion is brighter, noticeably brighter than the actual core of the galaxy within which it is happening. Completely insane stuff. To give you an idea, back in 1054, there are records by Chinese astronomers and others as well of a new star in the sky that was visible during the day because it was so bright, and that was actually a supernova happening within our own galaxy. That supernova now has expanded and cooled down so much that it's not really bright at all anymore, but we can still use amateur equipment to capture the remains of the supernova remnants after all of these gases that were spread out by the explosion have cooled down. They still emit light, and we're able to capture that. You can see on the screen the remnant of that supernova observed by Chinese astronomers in 1054. It's called the Crab Nebula. And I've captured that from here in Tokyo, one of the most light-polluted cities on the planet, with my amateur equipment. But let's go back to the supernova, that star explosion that is going on right now in that galaxy 40 million light years away. How would we go about capturing something like that? It sounds completely impossible. To give you an idea, if we took the fastest object that mankind has ever created, which is NASA's Parker Solar Probe, it reached a maximum speed of around 690,000 kilometers per hour. If we took that object and we launched it at that speed towards that supernova that's going on, it would take it around 70 billion years to reach there. By then, the sun would have stopped existing. The sun would have died. And yet, even though that supernova that happened 40 million years in the past is so far away, we're able to detect that using this equipment here, and actually even other equipment that is cheaper as well. I have one setup here, and I have a second setup here. Both of them are able to view the supernova, and then there are pictures that people took from their backyard with much cheaper equipment, where you can actually see the dot of light that is that supernova. That's completely insane. So how do we go about that? How does it work? Let's look at this thing. This is more or less the typical equipment that you would see an astrophotographer use to capture stuff like nebulae, galaxies, star clusters, all of that kind of fun stuff. But sometimes we have those events, those supernovae, that we can go ahead, point our telescopes to, and capture. And this equipment, it's actually fairly simple. It's made of this thing here, which is the main telescope. This telescope is a specific type. It's not typically used for astrophotography. It's a Maxtoff Cassegrain type of telescope. It's used usually for visual astronomy, and usually even more so for observing the moon and observing the planets in our solar system. Super cool for that, but here I'm repurposing it for capturing this supernova because the galaxy is so tiny in terms of the apparent size that we want to zoom in a lot, and this telescope happens to zoom in a lot. Specifically, it has a focal length of 980 millimeters, almost 1000 millimeters, which by the way is the same as the maximum focal length of that massive Sigma lens that has become kind of a meme around here. But yeah, so it gives you an idea that this thing zooms in a lot. At the same time, it's relatively speaking cheap at around $500 right now. So that's one telescope. It has a way to focus onto your targets. The way it works is it has a mirror at the back that you can move back and forth using a knob. And then we have this blue thing here. This blue thing is a camera. It doesn't look like a standard DSLR, does it? And that's because it does not intend to be used for anything else than astrophotography. This camera here has pretty small pixels. The pixel pitch is 2.9 microns for each pixel, which means that if you combine the small pixels with a long focal length, meaning a telescope that zooms in a lot, you can get a lot of detail per pixel. And so the combination of those two things basically make me think I'll be able to capture this supernova and basically distinguish it from the core of the galaxy, because that supernova happened in a star that is very close. From our perspective, it's still like, I don't know how many light years away, but it's very close, relatively speaking, from the core of the galaxy in which it is exploding. And something else that is specific with this camera compared to something like a DSLR, a point and shoot, or something in your smartphone, for instance, is that you can see it has a power cable here. And that's because it has an integrated cooler that is attached to the camera sensor inside. And those black things here, those fins, are basically there to expel the heat that is being emitted by the camera sensor and the cooling element of it. And with that, even somewhere like here in Tokyo, where right now in summer I get like 30 degrees Celsius at night, very humid, I can still cool down this camera sensor to -5 degrees Celsius. And the big advantage of that is that camera sensors, you may or may not know, they're very sensitive to heat. They actually mistake heat as light in a way. And so heat means that you get a lot of noise in your camera sensor because the camera sensor is like, oh, this heat is actually light. Let me register it as light. Doesn't matter when you're taking pictures like during the day, but when you're taking pictures at night, especially of very faint objects like the galaxy we're going to take an image of, that heat becomes a major issue. And so we cool it down to avoid that. And you can see there's also a USB cable attached to it because we are basically controlling this camera via USB, and that's where this little thing here, a computer, really it's actually running Windows, comes in. That little computer is connected to the camera, and so it's able to control the camera to take pictures, and that's what we're going to use, and that's a very standard astrophotography setup. But that's not all. And all of that thing, it's residing on this black thing here, black and green. And that black and green thing is what we call the mount for astrophotography, and that's what is used to actually track the stars or the galaxies. That's what we're going to do in the sky. We can use it. It's automated. It's robotic, like literally robotic. We can use it from the computer because, again, the computer is connected to that mount via USB, and we can tell the mount like, hey, move towards that galaxy. And then the mount will go towards that galaxy. We might have to do some adjustments in that automatically the PC will take pictures via this camera here. It will look at the stars in the star field that we have taken, compare it to a catalog of stars, and determine whether it is on target or not. If it's not on target, it will tell the mount like, hey, move a little bit to the left or to the right so that we center the galaxy. It's pretty much magic, and it's amazing. By the way, all of that is controlled via free and open source software on this PC. Amazing stuff. And now that we know we have this mount that can point your target, it can also track your target, because the Earth is very annoying because it rotates. That also keeps us alive, but details. It rotates, and when we're just like during the day, we know it rotates because the sun rises and then sets at the end of the day, right? And so it doesn't sound to us like it would rotate fast enough to have any impact. But when you're zooming in, like we are with this massive focal length relatively speaking, and small pixel camera, then that rotation of the Earth is actually a huge problem. We need to counter it, and that's one of the jobs of the mount as well, is to rotate in the opposite direction as the Earth does to counteract that rotation and keep our galaxy with that supernova that we want to image in the frame all the time, because the galaxy that we're trying to image, it's so faint that we have to have a very, very slow shutter speed. If you're used to photography, if I tell you like, oh, you have to use a very slow shutter speed, you'll be like, what, maybe 1/8 of a second, maybe like 1 second if you're getting those like nice waterfall images with an ND filter, maybe a bit longer if you have a strong ND filter. Here, we're talking about 30 seconds. With some filters, I may even be taking a single exposure of 5 minutes at a time. Crazy stuff. And so we need that mount to track things very accurately, and that's where something else comes in. That little tiny scope here with that other blue thing, which is yet another camera. The camera is again connected to the computer, and what's happening is that when we're taking those long exposures, slow shutter speed exposures with the main camera, this tiny camera will actually be taking images every 0.5 seconds, at least for me. And in each image, it looks at the stars, and if the stars move a tiny bit, it means we're going off course, right? So it tells the mount like, hey, you're moving off course, get back on track. So we have this feedback loop with this secondary telescope and secondary camera, and that's called the guide telescope and the guide camera. And yeah, they guide us, they make sure that our long exposures on targets in the sky, we are tracking the object properly. And that's another thing that's pretty amazing. And that's really the whole of the setup. That's how it all works. A mount to point to our target and track it, a cooled camera to take high quality images of the target together with a long focal length, and then a guide scope and guide camera to basically make sure we're always having perfect on target stuff. And with that, even though we are in Tokyo, one of the most light polluted cities on Earth, we'll be able to take pictures of that galaxy and see that supernova in progress. Now, bit of a warning, it's not going to be amazing pictures, because yes, we're in Tokyo, one of the most light polluted cities on Earth, and when you have like a veil of light pollution, a veil of light between you and the super faint target that you try to image, it's always going to be a problem. But you know, we can actually remedy that to some extent by imaging for a long time. So as I said, I'm in Tokyo. And if you're familiar with photography, if you take a photo during the daytime with a slow shutter speed, your sensor will, or your camera will saturate, and your image will be completely white. And the exact same thing can happen with this camera. In fact, this particular camera will saturate more quickly than your standard DSLR or mirrorless camera. And that limits the shutter speed that I can use for this camera. So for me, here in Tokyo, I'll be using a shutter speed of 30 seconds for that particular galaxy and supernova. So we're going to take one exposure of 30 seconds on the target, but it's only 30 seconds. That's maybe not enough to really reveal the galaxy and the supernova we're after. So what do? Well, we take a second 30 seconds exposure, and then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and we keep going all night long. What we do at the end is that we take all of those exposures, the raw data, basically like how many photons each of the pixels on the camera has counted for each exposure, and then we average all of the exposures together into one. And when that happens, I'll skip the math. Our signal to noise ratio, like basically how clearly we can see our target against the noise from our light pollution, that signal to noise ratio gets better and better, so we can see the target better and better. It's still going to be 1,000 times worse than if I was like in Yellowstone National Park or Death Valley National Park with no lights around me whatsoever, right? But still, we should be able to get something. So let me do that for the night and show you the result of a single exposure, as well as after we've done the average, after we've taken all of those 30-second exposure and like smashed them together into something even better. Will we see the supernova? Spoiler alert, yes. Is it going to be super amazing in terms of like an image that you would want to hang on your wall as a poster? No, but it's going to be super interesting, so let's get to it. Before that, by the way, if you're new to the channel and you like this kind of content, you can consider subscribe. That's the subscribe button. You can like the video. It really helps the channel out. And let us know in the comments what you think of that, of the fact that we can observe exploding stars from super light polluted cities with amateur equipment. Mind blown, but maybe your mind isn't blown. Let us know down in the comments. If you want to support me even more and you're planning on buying anything from Amazon or from some astro shops like Agena, High Point Scientific, etc., if you do so after clicking one of the links that I have in the description, it will help me out at no cost to you. If you are also looking for some merch like this order of the Lazy Geeks t-shirt and join the tribe, you can also check my merch down below the video, and you can also join the channel as a member or as a Patreon supporter. The link is down in the description. You guys, you make this channel possible. You are the actual sponsors of this channel. Thank you so much for your support. With that, let's look at some results. Okay, and we're inside, and I've actually managed to take 499 exposures, each with a shutter speed of 30 seconds on this NGC 7331 galaxy with its supernova going on. And so that's just 4 hours of data in a single night. Afterwards, the weather has completely degraded here in Tokyo. So I have not been able to get more exposures. And in astrophotography, the more exposures you get, the longer your overall time on the target is, and the better the signal to noise ratio is, meaning your images become clearer and clearer. But we'll see exactly the difference between a single frame and then the average of all of those frames together that I talked about earlier. But first, I want to quickly show you how the galaxy looks like without its supernova from a professional telescope. This is what we have in Wikipedia. We have the image of the galaxy here from Philips 24-inch Arcos telescope at the Mount Lemmon Sky Center. And also, it has a list of supernova that we know of, like one in 1959, one in 2013, one in 2014, and the one we're capturing right now, this one, SN 2025 RBS. I love this kind of names. Anyway, let's open that image without this supernova going on. And this is the type of view that we can expect when we look at a galaxy far, far away. Actually, so obviously this guy is the main galaxy, NGC 7331. But by the way, this guy here is also a galaxy. That guy is also a galaxy. That guy is also a galaxy. And something that a lot of people get confused about is what are all of those points of light around of all of those galaxies. Are they stars that are near those other galaxies, etc.? They're actually stars in our own Milky Way, because we are obviously on planet Earth in the solar system. We are in the Milky Way itself. When we want to look outside of the Milky Way, we have to first look through the other stars in the Milky Way that are in the way, that are in between us and outside our own galaxy, right? So all of those points of light there, they're just stars from our own galaxy, and we just peer through them in between those stars in our own galaxy to see what's outside our galaxy. And then 40 million light years away, we have this galaxy here, and we can notice that it has a very bright core at the very center. The core actually hosts a supermassive black hole. Fun stuff. But what I want you to notice is that at the center of that core, next to it, there's cool nebulosity, there's cool stuff, but there's no single bright point of light besides the core. And that's what we'll notice with the supernova that we image, is that we'll have a new point of light. And that's not just a star that appeared by magic in our own galaxy. It's actually a star within that galaxy 40 million light years away. So now that we know how it's supposed to look like, let's look at a single 30 seconds exposure from my rooftop balcony in Tokyo of that same galaxy. Fair warning, you will be thoroughly underwhelmed because we're in Tokyo, so a lot of light pollution. And first, here it is. Wait, why is it dark? That's a fun thing with astrophotography, and that's actually to some extent the case with real photography as well, is that your sensor, your camera sensor, what it does, it just counts photons linearly. And then it tells us oh, cool, for this pixel, I counted 10 photons. The one next to it, 15. The one next to it, 120. It just tells us that. It's very linear. But our eyes are much smarter than that. They detect those photons in, well, not the same way, but kind of the same way. And what our eyes do is that it will pump up the shadows so that we can see more the dark areas, and it will pump down the highlights of the image, the very bright areas, so we can see everything in HDR. And we need to do the same thing with our images, because right now the only bright points of light are a couple of stars that we've managed to capture. Fortunately, this piece of software, which is, by the way, used to process the astrophotographs that are provided to the public by NASA from like the Hubble Space Telescope, for instance, we're using the same software, which is called PixInsight, has a method to do that automatically. So let me show you how this looks like. And now suddenly we can see more stars. And more importantly is that the very center of the image, we see a fuzzy kind of shape. That is actually like this area of brightness there, like at the very center, is the core of our galaxy. And what is super impressive to me is that even though this doesn't look like much, right? We've, in this single exposure, because of all of the light pollution that I have in Tokyo, I've only been able to capture the very core of the galaxy and nothing much more. It's completely horrible compared to that professional telescope picture that we saw earlier. But what do we see next to the core? What is this? What is this point of light? You guessed it. That is the supernova going on. And it is insane that from Tokyo, from a rooftop in Tokyo, with a single 30 seconds exposure, we're able to see that point of light. This is the result with a single of my 30 seconds exposures. What if, as I mentioned earlier, I put them all together, average them out, and thus maximize my signal to noise ratio? This is what we get. By the way, the image is actually rotated 180 degrees from the single frame that I showed you. But we see exactly the same thing. I mean, we're still averaging very dark frames. So yeah, it's getting very dark. So we need to apply again that automated kind of stretch of the image so we can see what's going on. We can see the galaxy. Now we see a bit more of the galaxy, the nebulosity, and because we have a better signal to noise ratio, we can see the galaxy core here. It's the yellow thing. And then here you go. This super bright thing right next to the core of the galaxy. And we are in the same orientation as the image from the professional telescope. By the way, you can see there's one of the galaxies we saw above. The second one is there. If we go back to our earlier image, this is what the first galaxy, this is the second one. So we are in the same orientation. And you can see in the professional image, we only have the core of the galaxy. In our image, we have the core, and then we have this super bright thing that appeared suddenly for no reason. That's because a massive star exploded, well, kind of like fell upon itself and then rebounded into this massive, super bright explosion, so bright that I can see it from Tokyo, 40 million light years away. And all of that happened necessarily 40 million years ago. Anyway, completely awesome stuff. What is cool is that we actually can make this better. You know, we can crop the image, we can do all sorts of processing to get it to have slightly better colors, to sharpen it, and then to play with some contrast and saturation on the image. Like, it's very close to how a photographer would process their image, or what a smartphone does automatically for you when it saves an image. And here I have cropped the image to just that galaxy, and you can see again, we can see the main 7331 galaxy, we can see this galaxy there, that galaxy there, that galaxy there. They correspond very well to this guy here, that guy here, and that guy here from the professional image. And after sharpening and some more curves, this is what I get. Obviously, it is nowhere near as good as from the professional telescope, but this is from Tokyo in a single night. I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, we can see, again, this bright spot of light. This is a star that went supernova 40 million years ago, and just now, right now, these days, in August 2025, or actually even from July 2025, the light from that supernova reaches us, and we can see it is brighter than the core of that galaxy so far away. It's even brighter than a lot of the stars from our point of view in our own Milky Way. How insane is that? Let me know down in the comments what you think of how insane that is. And if you like this video, you can like the video. If you disliked it, you can dislike it. That works too. And if you want to support the channel even more, there's merch. There's, if you are planning on buying anything from Amazon or Agena, Highpoint, etc., there's using the links that I have down in my description before buying. That helps me out at no cost to you. And of course, you can become a sponsor of the channel, Patreon member, channel member. Link is in the description. You guys, you're amazing. This is all possible thanks to you. Thank you so much for your support. But yeah, with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and who knows, maybe you'll try your hands at imaging this galaxy and the supernova in it. We do not know when the supernova will get less and less bright. It could be a few weeks, it could be a few months. We don't know. And so all of the pros, they are looking at that supernova to see how it evolves with time. It's some awesome stuff. So if you can, if you're up for a challenge and you have like a zoom lens and a DSLR, I would say go for it. But yeah, with that, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.